I am so excited, you guys, for this next upcoming guest. She had a little therapy session with me the other day when I was introduced to her, and boy, I think you found another career path. So, Jehzan Amoto, an independent hip hop artist, educator, entrepreneur from Honolulu, born and raised here. She's a third generation Filipino American with roots in Ilocos Norte and Davao City, Philippines. So we both share that third generation on well, half of that for me and
Hey.
then Japanese for my other half. She is a rising star in the underground rap and youth scene and has been a growing force in Hawaii's entertainment industry. She has performed at countless venues around Hawaiian Islands and went on her first international tour to the Philippines, fortunately before COVID, right? February 2019, in collaboration with independent music label Our Altered State. Her newest album, I Did Invest In, Halo Halo, showcases her growth and
Hey.
identity as an artist, right? Featuring, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, lo-fi, boom bap
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
exclusively produced by Japanese beatmaker. I love this name, right now.
Yes.
Jehzan owns and
Yeah.
operates OTD Hip Hop, a blog and podcast for beginning artists. She'll share how you can find her, and she's looking to learn how to elevate their craft and brand along with her partner. She also owns and operates independent music label Skylix Records. Additionally, and this is where I'm asking for your expertise and experience as an elementary technology teacher. Well, she won't be talking about tech, but she focuses on building students tangible and real life skills. And we're just talking about Jehzan's going to be sharing how parents can inspire and motivate our children because if anything, this is the one thing I'm asked all the time, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
even more than the discipline issue because, when
Mm-hmm.
kids wake up after two during their, summer breaks, winter breaks. I think my daughter's still
Yes.
sleeping at age 19. There's nothing wrong, right? You reminded me there's nothing wrong. But what should we do? And how did you become who you are? You're relatively
Mm-hmm.
young, right? You're about
Mm-hmm.
30, you said?
30. Yes.
Share your journey and how your mom created such an amazing individual.
Thank you, Karen, for that marvelous intro. And I know we've talked a lot this week, and even right before we started recording, we were already going into it. So thank you again for your platform. Um, but yeah, long story short, I'm the product of divorced parents. My parents were basically like high school sweethearts, and long story short, they weren't really meant to like be married, but like uh because of being back in the early 90s and my grandparents being like pretty traditional Filipinos where Catholicism, Christianity is very big, and in Filipino culture and Asianist culture especially, um appearances is everything, right? How we're perceived in our community or in our families. It's a social hierarchy. It's been this way probably since the dynasties, you know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? And in Filipino culture since Spanish colonization and even Chinese colonization even before that. So I can go on and on about the whole social construct of things, but you know I think how parents can really in the modern day, I think that's let's start there. Okay, we are in 2022, people. We are in the third year of a pandemic that has taken out a lot of family members, a lot of people around the world. And for me, it's just reaching a point where I'm realizing, like, why isn't the world like clicking yet? Why aren't we realizing that life is so damn short? Why aren't we realizing that all these social constructs, all these pressures that we put on ourselves, largely from our cultures or our communities, like, why are we not getting it yet? It's about making our individual decision. And for me, I, as much as I definitely stand in solidarity with the Hawaiian sovereignty movement and all of these other solidarity movements, because and indigenous people in general, to be quite honest, I'm also a proud American because the American in me is what pushed me to be independent. I think that's the whole thing, is like, as much as we talk about white supremacy and stuff like that, I recognize all of that. We should definitely break down those barriers. But it's very, the American thing was to think independently, right? Like that's why a lot of my ancestors came to Hawaii or to America, because it was this new independent world where we could come up financially, come up socially outside of, it's different in Asia and in the Philippines. So I'm sorry, let me just bring it back. So what I'm saying is, like, my peoples, like, we are at a point where we can really make a change. We can really make decisions that are going to affect generations and generations. And as a hip hop artist, as a teacher, as a social entrepreneur, I like to call myself, like, that's just where I'm at. I'm not a extraordinary person. I'm not a what do I call, like, I'm not an invincible person. I'm just a human being, but I've made a choice early in my life that, like, hey, I can make things happen, but all of that is going to start by how I think. And I, in order to chase my goals, and I learned this from my mom, I need to think independently. Um so maybe you can kind of, I know I'm going on and on, but maybe you can kind of ask me the question again so that I can get
I love how you
back
said
into it.
your mom taught you to think independently. I think the
Yeah.
challenge is, these helicopter parents, and I look back and I think I was operating out of fear. So how do
Mm,
parents my whole mission is to help parents trust their child's journey, but you even
mhm.
helped me because I say trust your child's journey. Well, some of these journeys you wonder, like, if I don't intervene, if I don't guide, if I don't do
Mm,
something, who knows where my child will be. So how do we inspire and motivate
yeah.
without being too what's the word, like enabling, maybe, because we
Mm, mm,
operate out
mm,
of
mm,
fear,
mm.
though, right? So how do we have that
Yeah.
that right mindset that we're not overbearing?
Yeah, yeah. I think especially for mothers, that fear is never gonna go away. I talk about this with my mom too, and she's like, you're always gonna be my kid, even when you're a grandparent or
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
So I realize, like, yeah, that honestly, parents, like, that fear is never gonna go away. So we can't minimize it. We can't really do anything about it. There's always going to have that, like, physical and emotional feeling of fear of your kid getting hurt or whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
But um to answer the question, the overarching question of, like, how can parents motivate and inspire, and the bottom line is, like, when I really break it down, it comes down to leading by example. And with your particular situation, and parents in general, like, you guys have already, you've already set that example through your daily habits, through how you talk, through how you interact with people, through how you deal with stress and stuff. And unfortunately, in the community that I work in, which is largely like low income, I've worked in the Kalihi area in education and nonprofits for about 5 years now. So this is my community. This is the community that I come from. But luckily and blessedly, my mom, like, took a totally different path, because she has homegirls who are, quote unquote, like, living off the system, having a lot of different, like, what is called, like, baby daddies. And this is no knock to any of my friends or anybody in this community, but the fact of the matter is that's not healthy. You know what I'm saying? Like, drug abuse, emotional abuse, alcoholism, like, these are all not good for kids to witness. But unfortunately, many of Hawaii's youth and the youth in the world today are witnessing these things, are witnessing their mothers getting abused, are witnessing their fathers drink every single day. And I'm not gonna say that I'm holier than thou, because I'm a cannabis connoisseur. I'm like, I'm into that culture as well. But what I try to tell my students, I don't talk about weed per se, but I tell them that, like, at the end of the day, though, I'm an adult. So
Yes.
you may think that, like, oh, but like, oh, but, like, on your Instagram you drink, or you might do this, but it's like, yeah, but I'm an adult. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not for you. And the kids these days, they have a hard time. It's kind of like they have a hard, we were talking about this earlier this week, like they have a hard time differentiating like the matrix, like the internet world and
Yes.
the real world. But I saw this TikTok the other day that might give a little some teachers and some parents like relief. It was this TikTok of this young teacher in Hawaii who was saying like, oh, should we not like post all these things because in case your students or your kids might see you like in your TikToks or whatever drinking and having fun? They're like, no, because you still show up Monday morning ready to rock and roll. And that is the part of being an adult. Same thing for me. Like I watch my mom Friday night, especially in her 20s, right? And Hawaii culture, we were at her friend's house from Friday to Sunday, and we was just hanging out, eating like Hawaiian style, right? Like hanging out, poke. Of course, the adults maybe be drinking, maybe they're playing, gambling a little bit, playing loud music. That's the culture I come from. I'm from Eva Beach, you
Mhm.
know. So, and even Filipino culture, like from Friday to Sunday, where gambling, drinking, food, like that's just part of our culture. But my mom still showed up like 5:30 a.m. Jehzan, it's time to go to school. It's time for me to go to work. We need to get our stuff ready, and we're good. And then we work through the week, and then we play again on the weekend, you know? So yeah, it just comes from leading by example, and it's really tough, and every example is different. I've said this in like prior Facebook posts before, like there's no right or wrong way to parent. Like
Mhm.
whatever your interest is, and it may not be the interest of your kid, but as long as you show what your interest is and you build that bond, like that's the main thing. Like I don't care about fishing, but I'm still glad my dad took me fishing a couple times, but because I just remember that I was with my dad. You know what I'm
Mhm. Yeah.
saying? Or I'm not really into like, to be quite honest, like growing up like tomboy and stuff. Like my mom is quote unquote like very feminine, very girly. She's into makeup and hair and nails, and she can still throw down. We're still Hawaii tittas, you know what I mean? But
Uh-huh.
like I don't really care about like going shopping and getting my hair done and stuff like that. But I still went with my mom because that's what she's into. And at the end of the day, I was just happy to spend the day with my mom. So for parents, man, like whatever you can do that can build a connection with your kid. And sometimes these days, these Gen Z kids, like they might be like, "Ah, I just don't want to. I'd rather just be on my iPad." But that's where you have to be a parent. I think that's another thing too, is like sometimes parents want to be like the friend so bad.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I learned this actually working when I worked with middle schoolers. They kind of said like you have to let the kids know that like as much as you're their mentor and that you care about them, you are not their friend. You are
Correct.
still their elder, you are still their mentor. So yeah, your friend might tell you, yeah, let's just go, but then you have to be the parent that, or the person in their life to still tell them like, hey, enough,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know. And a couple months ago, or back in 2020, I have a bunch of cousins who like live all over the mainland, and so we basically had like a Zoom hangout with a bunch of my cousins, maybe like last year or something like that. And we were talking about we were talking about how we grew up, and we the question of like the circle time was about like which uncle or auntie are you like closest with and why. And it was crazy. Rest in peace my uncle Onassis Amoto. He passed away from cancer years ago, but he was mentioned a lot along with my dad, but he was mentioned a lot um in the conversation. And it was crazy because my boy cousins, these are boys from like Waipahu in the 90s and early 2000s. I watched my cousins like drink, smoke, party. They got kids early, you know. And no knock to my cousins, but again, I'm saying that's the environment that I was in, you
Mhm.
know. As much as I went to private school and stuff like that, and they were saying like the uncles that really that they love the most are the uncles that was able to tell them, hey, enough,
So setting
you know.
boundaries. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And so till this day, now that they have kids and stuff like that, they're like, man, like I loved him for this, and he was always the one to tell me, hey, enough. Even when they weren't listening to their mom, or even when they weren't listening to their dad, it was that uncle or that auntie that said, hey, enough, you know? So yeah, and Hawaii style too, like the way I mean, the way I teach, like as much as people are like, oh, Jehzan, you're so like open, like the kids must love you so much. Like, no, but when the kids mess up, oh, I grill them, Karen.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially my fourth graders and like fifth graders who are about to enter that pre-teen stage. I tell them, hey, and again, a lot of my students are in the Micronesian and Filipino community. And I tell them, hey, if you don't want to take school seriously, what does the police do to us? And maybe some parents, maybe some teachers, they might not really like my approach, but that's the world they're in. These kids that I work with, they're growing up in housing, they're growing up in substance abuse, they're being raised by their grandparents. And I say, hey, my parents didn't come from America either. My parents and grandparents didn't understand English either, but I still had to make an individual choice. You
Mhm.
still have to make an individual choice. But again, we're talking about parents. They have to make, or we, because now I feel like I'm at that age where I can say I'm like a parent, and I'm at that
Definitely.
parent auntie age. Like, we also have to make an individual choice. What are my daily habits? How am I talking to myself? Like, how is my inner monologue going? And the kids are gonna realize that, you know. And long story short, my kids, they might not want to choose to be rappers or entertainers or anything like that, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, so on and so forth, they're gonna realize, like, oh, like my auntie Jehzan or my teacher Jehzan, like she was really about that life. Like she was
Yeah.
really trying to she was really, you know. And again, it goes back to how I watch my mom. I watch my mom go to college. Like she had to take me to her night classes at LCC when I was like in elementary
Oh,
school. Those things, like a lot of parents don't realize, like those things, like in those, even in those struggle times, that's when you build like those, you can really build those connections. And then she went on, when I was in middle school, she had to take me to her night classes at HPU, and like it just started this
wow.
whole thing. And when I was in those classes, I was doing my homework and like half listening to whatever college math or college science that she was in. And
Oh my gosh. What can I ask what your mom did? As a
yeah, so
profession?
yeah, so she studied business. And my mom wasn't like, that's why I want her to, she wants to reach a point where she shares her story as well, similarly to like how you and Des are.
Oh, I'd love an
She
opportunity to interview her.
Yeah,
Just ask
I
her.
yeah, we'll definitely set that up. So she wasn't like a good student in school. Her my grandparents, they were uh they pushed education, but this is the weird thing about Filipinos, and I think this is the difference between the other Asian immigrants. Filipinos, again, just from my viewing, my experience, Filipinos will say like, "Oh yeah, school is important," but then they don't take the kids to practice. They don't show up to the parent teacher conferences. And again, I'm not knocking my Filipino people, but that is just what I witnessed. So they say like, "Oh, we came to America or we came to Hawaii for education, for better opportunities." Yet they don't make that example to show it. So they say, oh, do your homework, get good grades, but mom and dad, you don't understand English, you can't help me with my homework. So how am I going to continue to do good in school when you can't even help me,
I never
or
thought of
there's
it
not
that way.
resources? Yeah, and again, it's different because I saw like my Japanese friends or my Chinese Korean friends, their parents were all up in the
Yeah,
school, like, you know what I'm saying? But the Filipinos, maybe because we were working class, maybe because there's a little bit of hierarchy with colorism, because we can't knock that those things exist. So it's very different. So my mom came from that era where her parents were just working so much and they didn't help her. Long story short, like at that particular time, I love my grandparents again till the ends of the earth, but I'm just talking about from when they were parents to my mom, they didn't help her, or they didn't
but
know
don't you
how
think
to help
sometimes,
her.
yeah, what you just said, they didn't know how
Yeah,
because they did
yeah,
not have that college education or just the
yeah.
academic knowledge, right? And there was no Google. Nowadays, parents can
Yeah.
say, Google it.
True, true. But again, I'm saying, Karen, like I work with parents and I have parents in my families right now that are still not putting that foot
Mm,
forward. So it's
yeah,
a
yeah.
mind
It
thing.
is a mind. Yeah, it's a
It's a
mindset.
choice thing. So but yet they can go on Facebook and go live and comment and talk to family members on Messenger all day, every day, yet they feel that they're still inadequate to just read to their kid. And to me, that's lazy parenting. That's just me.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
just how I feel as a parent, auntie, and as an educator, and still like pretty much a young adult. You know, I see it from all these different perspectives. But anyways, yeah, I watched my mom like put herself to school, put herself through college, and like that was the biggest thing that I learned from my mom. And so now, she basically like I witnessed her from my understanding. When I was born, she was working at like Subway and working in like food and retail. And Karen, like I witnessed my mom go from like minimum wage to six figures. She's now a very successful loan officer, and she's been in the finance industry for over a decade. And again, to go from being like a young single Hawaii girl, Filipino girl parent, my mom is like shorter than me. I'm only 5 feet. My mom is a little lady as well, you know. But her mind and her energy and her aura, that is what I think I'm gonna take till I die, you know. Lo- that's
How,
just
how did
what
she get
it
her
is.
inspiration? I wonder.
And that's the crazy thing is like I get my inspiration from watching my mom and all her positivity and growing and stuff like that, even through the trials and tribulations. Hers literally came from out the mud, from not having a good relationship with her mom and her parents, from not having support in her family that could help her financially, academically, whatever, you know. And so her, I feel like her come up is definitely hard, more difficult than mine, and she had to really pull that from
Hmm,
inside,
hmm.
you know. And also from spirituality, whether that's God or calling upon her ancestors, self-help books. Like I really watched my mom do that. And so growing up, like by the time I was a teenager, we lived together in our own apartment. So even that, like I witnessed my mom take the long road. And I have a lot of homegirls nowadays that, you know, in the world, I don't know if you know, like OnlyFans and like all these different it's just like social media, right? It's like
Yes.
they want to just show off their bodies. And I'm all about body positivity. It's your choice, you know, and I'm all about that. But my mom really took the high road, and it's a long road, and it's a
Mm.
lot more
It's a
difficult
bumpy road,
road.
very treacherous
And
at
it's
times.
not, yeah, it's not a straight line. Like you have good days, you have bad days. But through that I learned like adversity. I learned like to focus, especially as a girl, like to like value my own intelligence and my own
Hmm.
heart and my own body, you know. So that's really what I witnessed my mom. And like as much as people are like, oh my gosh, Jehzan, like you're so successful and blah, I'm still on the come up, Karen. I'm not like on MTV yet. I'm not like signed or to a major label or anything like that. But when I look at my mom, like she's the one who's really making it. Like she's a single parent. She bought her own crib in Hawaii in this market. Again, she leveled up so many ways financially. And she's also bringing that knowledge to me as I get older, like talking about home ownership, talking about financial literacy, because it's not just about making a lot of money. Like it's about being able to manage your money. And that's something I'm
Yeah,
still learning
yeah.
as a young kid, as a millennial who wants to buy shoes and wants to buy jewelry. And my Filipino people, we do the same thing. I think I always share this story. Sorry for going a little
No,
overtime,
no,
but
no. I love this.
I always share this story that I learned when I was studying Hawaiian history, and specifically about the plantations in college. I read this thing about how like there was like these journals that the different immigrants kept,
Mm.
the Japanese, the Chinese, the Portuguese. And in this thing, it was like they realized like the Filipinos, they made the least amount of money, but they went back to the Philippines with the most amount of stuff, you know. So
Wow.
it goes so far back, materialism. And because we can't really come up, then we end up buying like physical things, you know, that make us feel like we're rich. And I understand that. And it was marketed towards us. It goes into like hip hop, like Run DMC, Adidas, Puma, all of these things were not
Yeah,
made for
yeah.
the Black and Latino market, but hip hop artists made it for them. It wasn't
Well,
until like
define their worth, don't you think?
right.
And that's what we're trying to, it's not like the Teslas, it's not the Gucci bags, but I think when you
Yeah.
grow up in the social media, the marketing, that is defined, right? When you look at someone, I think my daughter in eighth grade, yeah, they're really rich because he just got a whatever
Mhm.
jacket and shoes. But I told her, you
Yeah.
don't know. It could come from a
Yeah.
grandma, it could come from, and then you also could be in debt just because you have all of that, right? You can make
Yeah.
$1 million, but spend 1.5 million. I was
Yeah.
telling
Yeah.
someone that you have no idea. But so how do you think parents, I'm realizing that, it's like the
Mm.
financial education. My daughter just bought her first car and it's like the APR,
Mm.
whether to get extra warranty and
Yeah.
all of that. But I think they're slowly educating kids in school. But
Mhm.
how do we take the materialism out of it when that's all we see in movies and social media? It's not like you can
Mhm.
block that. Because even
Yeah.
without social media, you see it in school, you see it with your
Oh
peers
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you
And
know
see, this is the crazy thing, and this is what I have to say, okay? Like in in our community, I'm talking about like low income, middle class, maybe immigrant, second, third generation, whatever it is. It's crazy because even especially in this pandemic, it's a good example. Like we have parents who are trying to work, trying to compensate, but because they can't really because circumstances are not allowing them to have that quality time with their kid, so they just buy them. And I
Oh, we
see
were
this
just talking
again.
about this. Yeah, we
Yeah,
were just
yeah,
talking about one of my friends who's an attorney, actually. This is years ago. I work for the
yeah.
Hawaii State Bar, and they have the lowest quality of life because they don't spend quality time. Her son actually said, I'm going to sue you for parental neglect. She was a
Wow.
former Hawaii State Bar president. You know how it's an
Yeah.
organization that they need, and she thought, wow, but I'm providing everything for you, and that's what
Mhm.
parents need to realize when you're gone. Like I just lost my mom in October. It's not the
Mm,
things, it's
of
the
course not.
memories, and it's the time, and it's like the
Mhm.
lessons. Right? It sounds like your
Yep.
mom gave you like lessons of perseverance or just
Yes.
hearing you share that she took you to college.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
She could have just said, you know what, I'm gonna have my friend just watch you, but not
right.
realizing that that alone made such an impact on the way you
It really
viewed
does.
education, the way you viewed your adversity as a benefit actually, because if you are given too much, don't you think and I think that's what parents tend to do because they don't want their
Yeah.
kids to suffer the way they did, but they
Of course.
overcompensate.
Of course. No, and my mom like she didn't always like how do I say this? Like she probably didn't always have the means, but she always made the means meaningful. Like so for
Ooh.
example, like um if we I don't know, we had I just remember like certain down and out days, right? Where like when you go to church after church you like want to eat lunch or you want to eat brunch or something, right? And she would say, "Okay, like we can't we will only just go to Zippy's, but we have to like use up this 20 or $30 on our tab," but we would make it like worth it, and I didn't care that we were eating simon and eggs, like
Mhm.
as long as we were eating together. And even when her and her sister, her and my auntie, we lived together for a short amount of time, when they were in their 20s as well. And I still remember like eating Salisbury steak and eating corn out the can. And when I was a kid, like I didn't know that that was like poor or low income. I was just so happy that we was grinding rice
Together,
and
right? Yeah, it was
yeah,
the
yeah.
togetherness.
Yeah. So for parents, again, there's no right or wrong way. Like whatever moments you can find and make it meaningful, even if it's only taking out the trash with your son as a father. Like, hey, son, come with me, take out the trash. Like they're just gonna be so happy that they took out the trash with you, or like,
Instead of making them do it by themselves, right? I never thought of that because
yeah,
kids just crave company, their parents'
they
time.
do. They do. And as a teacher too, I see that like a lot of these kids, like they're just growing up like being neglected. So they put that onto their teachers, and teachers are also in a tough position because of course I want to give them that love and affection, but I'm not their parent, and so like, just making that thing. So yeah, anytime, like for me, what me and my mom, we talk about this all the time, but like it was those drives sitting in traffic in elementary, middle school from Eva. And you guys know how it is to drive even from Eva to Salt Lake. I had to
Oh,
drive from
yes.
Eva Beach to Red Hill. I went to Christian Academy, First Assembly of God. And like it was those morning drives where she was just we were just like talking story, and like I would tell my mom about, and being in the private school was a different thing too, because again, I come from my cousins smoking and drinking super young, my aunties and cousins going all over Eva Beach, like just partying, and what I'm just saying, that's just what I remember. But then like I would go to school and my mom would go to work, and it would be a totally different world where my peers in elementary, their parents were like doctors, lawyers, nurses, and stuff like that, whereas when my dad would pick me up, he was coming in his construction clothes, and so there was this whole hierarchy and social hierarchy that I had to like battle as a young kid, even being like Filipino back in the day. It was kind of difficult because they would say like, oh, you're Filipino. And I would, growing up, I was ashamed to be Filipino because they would say like, oh, Filipino, like you guys are like dirty, you're not like really Asian. Like these are what my Korean and Chinese and Japanese peers would tell me. Yeah, and then it's just crazy. Even though we went to the same school, our parents are paying the same amount of tuition, like, and you don't really realize this
The
as a kid.
stereotype too, right? It's like, oh yeah, because the Filipinos are
Yeah,
known to work in the fields. The Filipinos are known to be
yeah,
like my auntie was a housekeeper at the hotels on the Big Island.
right,
So
right.
just stereotypical, I guess, what is passed on, to
Yeah,
other kids. And then,
yeah,
so how did you deal with that? I mean, let's close with
well,
how do kids
yeah.
deal with feeling it's almost like inferior, because you are judged. Oh,
Mhm,
what do your parents do? Or what kind of
mhm,
car do you drive? Or,
mhm.
is there
Oh,
something,
exactly.
you know?
Yeah,
Is it-
well, again, for me, it's about finding those little pockets of time. And even though my mom did try to take me to school, there was a lot of times where I was just at home with my grandparents, and I
Mm.
also had to go back and forth between my parents, which is a totally different conversation we can have
Which
about.
is what a lot of
Like,
kids need to do. Like I tutor, and then they have like the clothes of the grandparents, clothes of the moms, clothes of the dads,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
sometimes the backpack is not where it's supposed to be, so I can't help with homework.
I
Oh, I forgot it
understand.
in the trunk at my grandma's. I'm like, okay.
I understand that. No, literally, that was what me and my mom had to go through. But yeah, the main thing that I remember from my mom is just those pockets of time, even in traffic to and from school. Like those are the times that we listened to music together. I told her like, oh, I don't really like how my friend like said this to me, and like my mom, like she's very compassionate and stuff like that. But again, still coming from like that Tita Pearl
Yeah.
City world, right? She grew up in Haleola, okay? And like she was just like, you know what? Like just tell them like your breath stinks too. Like, like even in the Christian school, like,
I
and
love it.
sometimes that got me in trouble because I remember like I think in one of my report cards they used to say like, oh, Jehzan is very smart and stuff, but she's a little too outspoken, but it's
Which
like
is admired now.
yeah.
And that's what my friend said. She would rather have her son get in trouble for being the class clown, for being
Yeah.
sarcastic, than, pigeonhole him and like, you need to be in this little box because
Yeah.
you'll stifle your child's natural like authenticity, and
Yeah.
it gets
Yeah.
you in trouble, but it's who they are. And do you think we should embrace that? I mean, we should not
Yeah.
make them feel like, oh, you're not good the way they are.
Yeah, yeah. So
You know?
that's the like again, every parent situation is gonna look this different, but and then by spending the time, and my mom has said this too, like by spending the time, you will get to know your child. A lot of times, like I
Yes.
know a lot of parents, like they don't even know like what their kid's favorite color or favorite
Yes.
show is. And then they just assume and say, oh, let's go to Chuck E. Cheese. Like that's not really being a good parent, like again, no parent, it's all different and stuff, but it's you can tell like when a parent puts in that quality time and gets to know their kid. And then from there, if you do that, then you can kind of like minimize those other issues, because you already kind of know, like, um I can't really share too much about what's going on in my particular family issue right now, but like, me and my girlfriend, we were starting to notice certain behaviors coming from our nieces, and then we realized, like, let's take a step back. And sometimes, again, I told you, like, I can go in, I'll tell them, like, you guys don't need Roblox then, if you can't clean up your room, and I'll start
Mhm.
scolding them, because that's our like parent reaction.
Yeah.
But then we always have to take a step back, and I have
Yes.
days where I feel super bad too, and I apologize quite a lot, because sometimes I can get, again, I can start going in and stuff like that. But I like, we take a step back and be like, hey, do you think she was acting this way because of this situation going on? And
Exactly.
then and then sure enough, the next conversation is a lot calmer. We apologize and say, sorry, we shouldn't have reacted this way. But still, that behavior is not acceptable. Like, you should clean your room, you should wash your dishes. But now we realize why you were doing. And again, parents, I don't know if it's difficult in Asian, but in Filipino households especially, again, I'm saying Filipino because that's my culture, that's
Hmm.
literally what I'm in. And um sometimes in Filipino culture, there's such a hierarchy of like how we operate in our family, like as far as like age, and even like for girls, like in Filipino families, girls are not supposed to be outspoken. Girls are not supposed
Hmm.
to share their opinions, even if it's hurting them, you know? So, but we're slowly helping our family members like break those barriers and say, hey, even though she's a girl, even though she's only 8 or 7 years old, she still is a human that has feelings, that has emotions, and is able. These kids nowadays, they're so smart with all this social media and all this education in school, and they're able to use their words, these kids nowadays, probably
Yeah.
even more than we were in past previous generations. They say like, oh, I didn't like how you said that, or I didn't like the tone of how you said that. And I'd be like,
Yes.
man, I didn't even know what tone was when I was 7.
Exactly. When I just read that, empowering their voice, they said it's a, I was looking at like 2022 trends, and we need to, like what you said, have them empower their voice. In closing, I noticed you said
Yeah.
something about your students learn like social, emotional.
Mhm.
Is that a separate class? Because I know they're
So
slowly
yeah, it's slowly
touching
being
on it,
added.
but it's
I
not
think in the
normal.
DOE, in public schools, I don't know about private schools, but in public schools, from my experience, I know that there's a program called Choose Love, and I believe it's mostly taught by their classroom teacher and like the school counselor. And so they just learn, it's like I don't know, maybe like 20-30 minutes a week or something like that, where they learn like breathing exercises, they learn like cool down techniques.
Wow.
And I do this with my in my tech class, especially for my younger grades, like kindergarten through second grade. I give them like what is called like brain breaks, and then during
I
those
love
brain
it.
breaks, they do like there's this website called like Go Noodle, and there's this thing where like they learn how to like make themselves into a ice ball, and then they learn how to melt themselves, and it ends the class, or it just gives them that 5 minutes of like, I'm just a puddle. Like
They need that
they
in high
just
school. They need to do that like
yeah.
a 5 minute every day because the teenagers are pretty much melting emotionally, throughout
Yeah,
the
yeah.
day.
I know, I know. It's tough. In elementary, it's a little bit more I guess you can say it's a little bit easier because elementary kids want to do all those dances and
Yes,
stuff,
that's
but
the thing. I had a 14-year-old,
yeah.
at Wanalua, yeah, middle, and he had to do
Hey.
yoga and meditation, and he said it's just so stupid. And I thought,
Yeah.
that's from a 14-year-old mindset. But you know what? I bet over time, hopefully they notice something, or it's just, like you
Mhm.
said, you need to do it. You might not like. I
Yeah.
always tell the students, you don't need to like it. I don't like this. Oh, you don't need to like it. You just have to do it. You can.
Yeah, you just gotta try it. Yep, yep, yep. And that's why, as an educator too, and even outside of like how where I work in education, I've already started to do like hip hop workshops in different schools. I did a workshop at Roosevelt. I did a small workshop in the Philippines when I went on tour over there at a dance studio.
Wow.
And so another thing that's cool, maybe you can share this with your son, but like even like NFL and like NBA players are now doing yoga because not only is it ability and stuff like that, but for their mental health.
Yes.
So I saw a TikTok where it was like this, like it was like 50 NFL or college football players, like really getting into it with the yoga because it really it helps them,
Mentally,
So
emotionally, physically,
yeah.
yeah. Well, how can people find you? Because I think if any teachers are watching this and they would love
Hmm.
to have if you're open to going to
Yeah,
schools,
yeah,
it should become part of teachers, I think, are, as a teacher, I always wanted someone to come in the room, come to school and
yeah,
just
yeah,
do
yeah.
something different, whether it's Humane Society or someone,
Yes.
you know, guys who have like they had suffered from throat cancer, so they would have a tube,
Mm-hmm.
but to come
Hmm.
in and teach them, I mean, that's real life lessons right there,
Yeah.
to share. How do they reach you?
So for me, as far as like outside work, I always give them my Jehzan exclusive email. So that's Jehzan exclusive EXCLUSIVE @gmail.com. And then literally like Google social media, it's Jehzan exclusive, music streaming, it's all Jehzan exclusive. So wherever you want to find me, whether that's Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, it's all Jehzan exclusive. So it shouldn't be too hard
And I'll
to
put it
find
on,
me.
yeah, but below this too, so they'll know how to reach you. But thank you.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh, this was so not only informative, entertaining, enlightening, but I think you have a gift, and I think more
Thank
people
you.
need to hear your story. And remind your mom. Yeah, I think
I
people just
will. I
need to
will.
share their stories to give hope, inspiration,
Mhm.
especially when people are sometimes losing hope. With these
Mhm.
numbers rising and like doing just not knowing where we are going, right? But if you have
Mhm.
that balance and that hope that you seem to inspire others through music, through
Mhm.
words.
Mhm. Yeah. And then people can also go to jehzanexclusive.com. That's my website.
Oh, I was looking at that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I know that you have just an incredible road ahead of you. Please keep in touch, and if there's
Thank
anything I
you.
can do to help you promote it, and I'm sure Deslin, yeah, as soon as she interviews you, she's
Yes.
Karen, you need to have
Hey. And
Giselle.
thank you, Karen, for purchasing my digital project.
Definitely. I really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. I really enjoyed it. I'm telling my students about it. I think you just have to, it's like
Wow.
grassroots, right? You have to just tell people. And I was just reading about the power of the word of, right? It's just word of mouth. We don't
Yeah.
really need
Yeah.
ads. I mean, a lot of times when you see these people going viral, it's because of one TikTok. I remember like
Mhm.
Justin Bieber, one YouTube
Yeah.
video, and then
Yeah.
all of a
Yeah.
sudden
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
global.
I know it's really cool these days. So
Any
yeah, thank
tours?
you,
Any tours
Karen.
scheduled?
Man, to be honest, no. I really I wish I could say yes, but with COVID,
That's the thing.
it's really difficult. However, the cool thing though, what I was able to diversify myself a lot in 2021, and so like the virtual world, Twitch,
Yeah.
Instagram, YouTube Live, like all those, even these Zoom things, like
Hmm.
these are already going to reach an exponential amount of people because I'll be honest, this is just me talking about like the hip hop underground and the scene for music artists. I think Bruno Mars, he even said like he was doing an interview and he was talking about how like his job in Hawaii was he would work at oh my god, what is that? Like the Magic Luau or something
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah. Oh my gosh,
Waikiki.
we saw him. We saw him when he was 5. I have a picture of my mom with a
Wow.
5-year-old Bruno. I'm like, oh my gosh, we saw him when he was that young.
And I guess he continued to kind of do that work, and he said that like as soon as he turned around he'll start crying because of like feeling like all he has to do is like be this commodity or like this puppet.
He was
And
such
then
a young boy,
yeah,
right? Being
yeah.
made into a commodity, like you said.
Elvis, yeah, made
Yes,
into Elvis
he
and
was
stuff.
good. He was a good
Yeah,
Elvis.
yeah, yeah. But eventually he got so again, like I have done shows in Hawaii where there was like a little amount of people all the way to doing like Waikiki Shell and stuff like that. And the hard part is that me and my friends talk about this too, and we say like it's crazy because in Hawaii so many people are straight up talented. Like if you remember back to your high school days where the boys would just play ukulele,
Yeah,
and you probably remember how talented these guys were, but because it's kind of like everybody is so talented, that's why we don't have enough platforms or ways to like compensate artists out here, which is why so many choose to go like out of state or international, which is the route that I've taken. However, with this pandemic being locked in at home, these Zoom things, these Twitch things, Instagram, it's like it's crazy because it actually, one, it's more cost efficient because you don't have to leave your house, and then two,
exactly.
like,
Well, it can be global, right?
yeah, I probably meet more people in like the virtual stuff. But again, of course, the drawback is nothing beats like the in-person interaction, but that's the difference, is like I can go on Twitch or Instagram and already have like a certain amount of people that are tuned in, that can follow me, that are willing, and then versus going to like another venue in Hawaii, and like it's just a harder sell, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
But I learned a lot by doing those. In 2019, I did 52 shows a year in the year, which means
Oh
that
my
that was basically a
gosh,
show every year. Like I have the spreadsheet. I was like, whoa, like
that is
I really,
crazy.
yeah. And then to flip it into 2020 and like switch it all into like virtual. So
Virtual.
um 2020 for me was kind of like, I think it was like a drawback year. It was like to reevaluate, and then 2021 was to get back into the virtual and like seeing what I can do. And then now,
Experimenting, right? A lot of us
yeah,
experimented. I would never have
exactly.
done virtual tutoring, and now, it's like it's something that everyone does, right? Virtual business.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
well,
So
we'll have to
anyways,
continue on part
yeah,
two because I would love to hear more about like even your mom, and just you just have so
yeah,
much to share, to inspire
yeah.
others. But enjoy your Saturday. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. I
And I'm
will. I
sure we'll
will.
keep in touch.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you, Karen. Have a
thanks.
good day.
You
God
too.
bless. Happy New Year.
Bye.
Bye.